All right, so again, welcome back. We're going to be wrapping up this module, talking about Roosevelt and his stuff that he did abroad in terms of foreign policy, stuff like that. We gave him quite a bit of praise. If you will think back, we talked about Roosevelt in pretty high regard when it came to what he did internally in the United States as far as being a progressive. He kind of had those major initiatives like the Food and Drug Administration, fighting for workers. He did quite a bit of that, and quite a bit to basically commend for him across the board. The way he went about things was maybe not presidential, right? He was very much a man's man. He was very much gruff and tough, and he was kind of like, John Wayne almost, kind of idea that he just, he didn't care. He was very, very, just a tough guy. So he was very well beloved, and he was a great conservationist, right? He loved the outdoors. He wanted to protect the beauty of America. Now, abroad, there's quite a bit more things that are more controversial, and there are some important and very beneficial things he does, but definitely there's some that we could probably look at and say, I don't know if that was the best way to go about things. Because the U.S., then it comes down to the question, does the U.S. really have any business interfering with the affairs of other countries? And that's really a foundational question when you think about what America's foreign policy role is. Do we actually have any right to meddle in other people's governments and in their economies and stuff like that? So first, a little bit of a word kind of on how the old foreign policy had worked. Our old foreign policy basically, started with colonization, right? We were colonies of England, so our first experience with foreign policy was that we had an empire and a king that ruled over us from across the ocean, and we didn't like that. So we kind of bucked the system and said, heck with you, we're not going to do this. So we overthrew colonialism, right? And then America basically went on to what we called the Monroe Doctrine, which was basically the only foreign policy statement that we had as a country for about 100 years. It was made in 1823. It basically had said that the Western Hemisphere should be free from influences from the Eastern Hemisphere, right, forever. And basically what that meant is that America is in the Western Hemisphere, Europe is in the Eastern Hemisphere, y'all stay out of our business and leave us alone. Y'all have no business over across this side of the ocean. Anything that happens over here is up to America. Leave us alone, okay? And so now the Monroe Doctrine was kind of a dog with no teeth, right? Because we weren't at that point a global power, right? England and Spain and all these other countries were still far superior to us in terms of military. So we win the revolution and we kind of just go out there and we're like, yeah, that's right. Don't be messing with America. And y'all better not come back. And everybody's like, bro, if we wanted to come back, if we really wanted to come back in full force, we'd squash you like a bug. So really, but that was kind of what we upheld. Because, it's not till really the turn of the century that we're actually strong enough to actually uphold the Monroe Doctrine. We also have the foreign policy of manifest destiny. And we talked about the idea that we're going to start spreading across the Pacific and all of these things, okay? And Roosevelt, when he becomes president, he decides he's going to take the old Monroe Doctrine and he's going to kind of update it. Because now, we beat the Spanish in Cuba, we beat them in the Philippines, we've got modern weapons, we've got a navy, we've got colonies, we've got wealth, we've kicked everybody out of the Caribbean, we've kicked a lot of people out of Latin America, we are the predominant military force in the world. So now Roosevelt's like, hey, we're going to take that old Monroe Doctrine and we're really going to give it some teeth now, right? And he decides he is going to, rid the United States, or rid the Western Hemisphere of European colonies. He's going to be much more aggressive abroad. He's going to be, really taking this idea of spheres of influence and saying we're going to expand that as far as we possibly can. Anywhere that we can put a naval base and put some battleships, we're going to be in control of to some extent, to have some say over their government. Okay? And that's kind of controversial. One of the big places we do this is China. And the Chinese really don't like this. And Japan really doesn't like this. But we're going to try and really assert ourselves and flex our muscle on a grander scale. America has, like I said, this new sense of world power. And it also doesn't feel like the presidents have any concern with Congress or the public. They basically go, hey, we're going to go do whatever we want, and we don't really care what the people say or what Congress says. Like, they kind of feel like they have this unfettered power. They can use executive power, executive privileges, and do what they want. And so if Teddy Roosevelt's looking here and going, hey, I'm the president, and I want America to be stronger and safer, so I'm just going to exert my power. Drake, stand up. And so he's very active in foreign policy. He actually believes that American power in the world is very important. Whether you want to be skeptical of that or not, you can kind of make that argument whether or not America should be the preeminent power. Kind of depends on how much you believe in capitalism and democracy as we do it. There seems to be failing belief in that as we go. But it is important to kind of keep that in mind. And so he's sitting here and he thinks that the world can benefit greatly from the American way, okay? And, he says, hey, we are the civilized world. It's where we get this idea of like third world countries. They're uncivilized, right? We're the civilized world. We're white, Anglo-Saxon, very European descendant kind of idea there. And this is the right way to do things. Everybody else is wrong, okay? They're uncivilized, non-white, Latin, Slavic, economically inferior. Their jobs, the civilized world, it's our jobs to make products. We're industrialized. We make things. The uncivilized world, they have stuff. They have materials, but they're not smart enough to figure out how to turn those trees into chairs. No, they need us. So what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll take over and we'll use their materials and then we'll bring them back and we'll turn them into real products and then we'll sell them to them. Instead of, showing them how to do it themselves, we'll just take advantage of it. And that's more civilized, And so obviously it's a very slippery slope from we're going to help people to we're going to exploit them, right? And what they believed is that a civilized nation not only had the right, but it was necessary for them to intervene in an uncivilized nation. And we saw that in Cuba in particular, that, we sit there and go, oh, Cuba, poor Cuba, Spain's really kept them down. We should step in and show them how it's done. We're better than Spain. We're better than Cuba. We can show them what we're doing. And so it's really, really important to understand just how important some of these things were. Now, again, you have this idea here of, speak softly but carry a big stick, right? That's Roosevelt. That's kind of his saying, right? Hey, and he called his foreign policy, which is kind of gangster, he called his foreign policy big stick diplomacy. Yeah, bruh. Yeah. Basically, he said, hey, look, we got the biggest, baddest military. We get to decide what the world does. And everybody's like, but we don't like that. And we're like, pew, 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 pew. Yeah. And then everybody's dead. And then we're like, so now we can do what we want to do. Right? And so, again, if you're carrying a bat around in your backpack and you're willing to smash people's skulls in, you don't really have to worry about getting somebody talking back to you, because it only takes about one or two people getting their skulls bashed in before you walk into a room and go, hey, everybody, stand up. And everybody's like, y'all better stand up. He will whack you in the head with that stick. Right? You know what I'm saying? Kind of messed up. Now, the big stick foreign policy, that's the media's name, for his policy in Latin America and the Caribbean. But what you need to know probably for test purposes is that it's known as the Roosevelt Corollary. The Roosevelt Corollary. And like I said, the Monroe Doctrine, the Roosevelt Corollary is really an extension of the Monroe Doctrine in a lot of ways. It is the teeth to what the Monroe Doctrine wanted to accomplish, right? Monroe Doctrine said, Europe, you stay out of North American business. And then Europe was like, and if we don't? And America was like, well, you better, because we said you're supposed to. And Europe's like, yeah, but we got a bigger army than you, so what are you going to do if we don't? We're going to, you better not, right? Now the Roosevelt Corollary says, hey guys, don't come over here. At first we were like, you better stay over there, right? Have y'all ever been seen somebody fight, and the person who ended up getting their butts whipped in the fight was the person who was definitely the most aggressive person at the beginning of the fight, being loud and all that stuff? Have y'all ever seen that? In movies? How about like in UFC? Does anybody in here watch UFC? Okay, so I've seen some people that were some mad smack talkers that got smoked. And the guy that smoked him, if you've ever heard of the guy Khabib, Khabib don't say nothing, right? Khabib, they do all the pressers, and he's just like, this is going to be a good fight. I am probably going to win. Because I think he's Middle Eastern, right? And he's like, yeah, he's Muslim. He's like, I am probably going to win. And he talks like real soft. That man got that stick, bro. He going, whack, 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 whack. Take you out. But the guy that's all yelling, well, the Monroe Doctrine is us being like, ah! And Roosevelt's like, hey, just so y'all know, if you're going to come over here, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. I don't have to yell. No reason to yell. Okay? And so it's really an interesting policy. He also said that should any Latin American nation engage in chronic wrongdoing. Now, this is an interesting thing. Part of the Roosevelt Corollary said, if any country in Latin America just keeps doing wrong things, America will step in. Now, define wrong things, right? Who gets to define what's wrong for Guatemala? Well, America, of course. Who gets to decide what's wrong for Cuba? Us, America, of course. So what kind of wrong things could they be doing? Well, hey, maybe Cuba wants to borrow some money so they can build some stuff. So they go borrow money from Europe. America's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You don't need to be borrowing money from Europe, okay? That's going to get you in trouble. They're going to ask for that money back, right? In fact, this actually does kind of happen to some extent, right? The Dominican Republic, 1905, they go into jeopardy of being invaded because they had borrowed so much money from Europe and couldn't pay it back. And Europe's like, well, you owe us a lot of money. Guess we'll just take your whole country. And the U.S. is like, maybe you shouldn't. How about this? They're in our sphere of influence. So Europe, why don't you just figure out a payment plan that they can pay you back? Because it'd be a really bad idea for you to come over here and try and invade. And Europe was like, okay, yes, sir, sorry. I mean, we were kind of at the peak of our like, just say something. Just say something. Go on then. Talk that noise. All right, so basically he's saying, hey, Europe, just stay over there. No intrusions from European countries. We're not looking for any intrusions. Of course, this is a political cartoon that really kind of captures it. Roosevelt is here with a huge bat, and you can see he has his feet on the U.S. right down here. It says USA. He's got his feet here on the U.S., but he also has his feet on Latin and South America. And here you have Latin Americans and all these people, and then you have Europeans, and he is standing between them. And he is intervening as necessary, okay? And that's going to end up bringing us eventually to the Panama Canal, which is definitely the most important thing that Roosevelt does in relation to foreign policy. And we'll come back to another couple examples in a minute, but this, because there's definitely some important things in Asia, but the Panama Canal is a major achievement. It was kind of inevitable because at some point America was going to have to figure out a way to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific faster, okay? And the Spanish-American War there, between Spain and America and Cuba, and then we went to the Philippines. We had our boats there in Cuba, and then you had to get all the way to the Philippines, you had to sail 12,000 miles around South America. And it really exposes this idea that we need to build this. And it's going to be one of his biggest legacies. He's going to stop at nothing to pretty much get what he wants. Now, America was not the first people to try and build this thing, believe it or not. Britain, they wanted in on the action. Britain and France wanted in on the action as well. They said, hey, if America builds this thing on their own, they're going to have this huge military advantage. We don't want that. So they try and get into it. And back in like 1850, they went in there and they tried to figure out a way to build it. And they got going and they realized like this is a money pit. There's no way to do this. In 1850, I mean, you don't even have you got people out there with like shovels and stuff, like trying to build the Panama Canal, right? Like there's no tractor, you know what I mean? Like, so that kind of falls apart. And so the U.S. eventually kind of takes care of this. And so, they basically come in and, then after the English was the French, and the French came in, and so many people died from disease and malaria and stuff in Panama that they gave up on it. It's very mountainous. It's very narrow. It's not easy to get through there. They actually looked at other places like Nicaragua or places like that was a little bit flatter, but there was no real way to do that. Panama had to be it. Here's the problem. So America finally gets France and England, they're out. It can't be done. America says, oh, it's going to be done. We're going to do it. America. Don't believe me, just watch. Okay? And so America goes in, and they decide, okay, we are going to build this canal. Problem is by this point, Panama is not a country. Right? Panama is owned by a country called Colombia, which is just below it. In South America, it connects. They own Panama. And Colombia looks at it and says, America, I know that you had this really smart idea, but our deal was with the British and the French. And, you're all talking big and bad, and you got all this money. You tell everybody, oh, we're so powerful. We're going to have to renegotiate this deal. And the Americans realize, oh, this is not going to be good for us. This is going to be bad. This is going to cost us too much money. This is not going to be, a good deal for us. What are we going to do? Well, funny enough, it worked out just right that the people in Panama didn't want to be controlled by the Colombians. So we made a deal with some Panamanian rebels. We send in a bunch of weapons and stuff, and we say, hey, we're going to help you revolt. So we start a revolution. And the Panamanians, who want their own country, are going to try and overthrow the Colombians. Now, the Colombians are like, you can't do that. So they start to get their army together. So we park battleships along the entire coast of Panama. And we go, hey, Colombia, you go ahead and send that army in. Remember that big stick we've been telling you about? You're about to catch it upside the head, bruh. Come on, send your army in, Colombia. See how that turns out for you. So eventually, we hold Colombia off long enough, and they realize that now that America has decided that Panama is going to be its own country, they're going to be their own country, which is super messed up if you really think about it. But the Panamanians create their own country, and guess what? We go to them, and they're like, hey, we would really like a good deal on this land. And they're like, sure, buddy, no problem. Because, of course, we just helped them overthrow Colombia. And so 3 days later, we recognized them as a country, and guess what? Now we get our land because the Colombians couldn't do anything. And we get basically a 10-mile strip of land, and we basically, I want to say we got it for like $1. Like, for real. We got like a 100-year lease on it for like $1. We were like, hey, Panama, aren't you glad you're your own country? They were like, yes, thank you very much. And we were like, hey, we want to build a canal across here. And they were like, see. It's not racist. They speak Spanish in Panama. See. How are you going to go to the jungle? We're like, dynamite. And that's exactly what we did. And then I think we eventually gave it back to Panama eventually because our lease ran up. But it cost us $400 million to build. $400 million. Also, malaria and mosquitoes. It's the middle of the dadgum jungle. And so that was kind of crazy. But it was extremely, extremely important. We actually ended up having a couple doctors that worked with the Army that go down there and figure out how to prevent malaria. Not prevent it completely, but a guy by the name of Walter Reed. Anybody ever heard of Walter Reed? Walter Reed? No? Walter Reed Medical Center? Like the VA hospital, Walter Reed? No? Good to know his name's in high regard. But, we end up having to, we cut through and we now have a new access point to the Pacific Ocean. And so you have the Roosevelt Corollary, again, kind of just making sure that we understand what's going on there. The results of that, we used it to justify interventions. The U.S. Marines get sent multiple times to Latin American countries. Latin American countries view this as American oppression because that's what we're doing. We're clearly trying to colonize Latin America. Guess what? Those countries, they still aren't doing so hot. We kind of, for lack of better terms, raped and pillaged their economies and took all the raw materials and destroyed them. And then we're like, oh, sorry, we shouldn't have done that. Be your own country. And they're like, but we don't have anything left. And they're like, oh, well, you'll figure it out. We showed you how democracy works. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. So American Navy, we just crushed everybody. Now, just for fun, we'll talk about some presidential firsts for him. He was the first person to invite an African American to a White House dinner. Go Roosevelt. Yeah, bro. He was the first person to ever be like, hey, you're black. You should come to dinner. And they're like, where are we going to go to dinner? At the White House. And they was like, ooh. Yeah. He is the first one to ever have Secret Service protection. He was the first to win the Nobel Peace Prize. because he actually helped to mediate the end of the Russo-Japanese War. He was also the first president to take a trip outside of the United States, which is kind of cool. I believe that he went to... No, I don't think he went to Japan. I think he went to Latin America. And he went to Africa. I think he went to go shoot lions. Yeah, he was a big game hunter. I think he did that while he was president. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. But anyways, he was the first president to ever be submerged in a submarine. He was the first president to ever have a car. He was the first president to ever turn on the lights at the White House. To operate a light switch at the White House. Bro, yeah. Pretty interesting. I mean, he was a really interesting guy. So, that's going to really be the end of our progressive era lecture series.